you're going to have over excess metabolism, too much metabolism. If you have too much metabolism, it is going to affect the body, your body functions. You will have excess is not needed. Insufficient is not needed. It has to be right amount. So that means that even your heart is going to pump faster because of metabolism. There is more glucose produced, more energy, more power, so everything starts to overwork. The heart is beating faster. If you have your heart beating faster, you can die, because that is called a tachycardia. Tachycardia is increased blood, increased heart pumping, heart function. So your heart runs like this, and then if it goes too far, then you're going to get cardiac arrest, so you can die. So you are dying because of the hormone. See, because the hormone was produced too much. So that should not happen. It should not be produced in excess. Are you recording?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that is another example. Then what about the opposite? If not enough of it is produced, then you are going to have deficiency of that hormone produced from the pituitary. It comes to the thyroid gland, then it will not produce sufficient effect. So it will not promote enough production of the thyroxine. Now, if you don't have enough thyroxine, then your metabolism is affected. Now, everything is weak because there's not enough energy, and then your heart starts going slow. And if your heart is slow, not beating fast, you have something the opposite of tachycardia, doing faster. So you have bradycardia. Bradycardia, tachycardia, they are opposite. Bradycardia means too slow. So if your heart is pumping too slow, you will not have energy. You'll be so weak, you cannot get up, then you pass out, and then you have cardiac arrest. Same thing. So you see, now the opposite of what we saw with overproduction is happening with underproduction. So that means that the amount that is produced must be regulated. So that's what the brain is doing. The brain regulates it just like it regulates your nervous system. So this is the difference between endocrine system and the nervous system. All of these hormones will work in the same way, and each one will cause two opposing diseases, contrasting diseases. One is due to excess, one is due to insufficiency. So we can go each one of them one at a time, and that will allow us to review all the entire endocrine system, which is very difficult to understand. So you have to have this out, the overview in your mind when you are talking about the endocrine system. So that way you have to memorize all this. So it involves memory, reasoning, and understanding. So now we can put each one of them. Or follicle stimulating hormone. You know what a follicle is? A follicle is young, immature eggs. Now, who produces eggs in human? Who produces eggs? It's only women. Men don't produce eggs. They don't have that capability. It's not inbuilt. They don't have it because they are not going to be pregnant. So the egg will be produced from each ovary. Every month, every 2 months, one ovary produces an egg. So they alternate. If this month the right ovary produces an egg, then the next month the left, then right, left, alternating. That continues. If you're a female, beyond menopause, you produce those eggs until you reach a stage between adolescence. You produce until you reach menopause, when you run out of eggs. Then if you run out of eggs, you can no longer have your menstrual period, which is common and normal in women monthly. That means you cannot have children anymore. So you cannot have children after menopause. So it is just for reproduction. So now follicle stimulating hormone is produced by the anterior pituitary. It is distributed all over the body because it's emptied into the blood in general. So that it will not affect any part of your blood where it goes, except when it comes to the ovary. So when it comes to the ovary, it will affect growth and maturation of these eggs. The eggs are called ova. One is called ovum. So they go in stages so well organized that not more than one egg can be completely matured in 2 months. Only one. So the production goes into stages until the egg is mature, and after the egg is mature, it will be released from the ovary to the fallopian tube. The fallopian tube is connected to the ovary and the uterus. The uterus is right here in the middle. It's like a kind of triangular arc right here in the middle. It goes like this. And it has tubes connected it to the ovary. The ovaries are on this side. And then the uterus is connected to the vagina and then out. So look, the eggs will be produced and then they will be released from the ovary, and that release requires another hormone, which is the luteinizing hormone, LH. So luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, both of them work for reproductive system. So now you see how the brain, through the hormones that it produces, is affecting all the systems. As we said earlier in the introduction, the definition and difference between hormones, endocrine system and the nervous system. Those who came late, you probably missed that. It's very important to allow you to understand everything as we go step by step. Then luteinizing hormone will affect the release of the eggs. So what happens if too much of it is produced? That's a big problem, because too many eggs are going to be released at the same time. That's not wanted. It is not a normal thing. So if you have 2 eggs or 3 or 4 more eggs released at the same time, you are going to have a multiple pregnancy. Multiple pregnancy means you can have twins, triplets, quadruplets, pentuplets, and on and on and on. Yes?
My aunt had triplets.
Who?
My aunt.
Your aunt? Okay, sometimes there are certain genetic components also involved. Like you can find that
twins run in my family.
Huh?
Twins run in my family.
Okay, sometimes it runs in families because the genes are also involved here, but we are not going to go there because it becomes so complicated. And you see that in families. My wife is a twin. She has a twin brother. And my daughter had twins. I have 2 grand twins. So you see, sometimes it runs in families. But anyway, it goes with the production here of excess production of either follicle stimulating hormone or luteinizing hormone. Now, so you don't want to have twins, because twins is a big problem. Because first of all, when after 9 months, when the baby is mature to be born, when they are twins, they are not yet mature, because they share everything that is used to nourish was meant for only one, but now there are 2. So each one is getting only half. So they cannot mature in time because they don't get enough nutrients. They don't get enough support. So the twins are always born prematurely. And they are born they are smaller than normal baby. The more twins, the smaller they will be. If you have 10 babies, they will be almost like the rat babies. They're small. and that way is a big problem because they cannot survive. It's very difficult for them to survive. They will die. But if there are 2, today with modern medicine, they can even allow 3 or 4 to survive. But they have to stay in the hospital for a longer time until they could have reached the maturity they needed to be born. So they stay in a special part of the hospital called NICU. NICU is Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, where they are in intensive care, where they are monitored and they are put in an environment like the same environment they should have had when they were in the uterus until they mature. That's when they go home. So you don't want to have twins. And if you have twins, economically it is expensive, because if you buy clothes, you have to buy double. If you feed them, you have to buy 2 feedings. Everything is double, and it costs money. And nobody wants that. So you just want one baby at a time. So that is a problem. But what about if not enough of those hormones are produced?
No eggs.
what are you going to have?
No kids.
Infertility. You can't have kids. You can't have babies. You're a normal female, but you can't be pregnant. You're married, you have a husband, you always stay together, everything normal, but no kids. You see, I'm not making fun, I'm just telling you what you know and what happens. So nobody wants to get married and not have kids. There are very few people who want that. But a lot of people, they want to get married and get kids. And they decide how many kids they want. Maybe 1, 2, 3. Okay, that depends on you. But then, what determines is this. If insufficient, you will have no kids. Infertility. Although, today with the modern medicine, they can help such parents to have kids. There are many methods they use to help them have kids. But we are not going to get into that. Okay, then let us go to the growth hormone. Now, growth hormone, as the name implies, it affects growth. So, growth hormone affects the lengthening of your bones. Now, look, growth takes place at the ends of the bones. Look at the skeleton. You can turn them. Okay, so here we have the long bones. You already know that. You already got a skeleton. So these are the long bones of the upper extremities. All these are long bones. These ones short ones, but these ones are long. See? And then in the lower extremity, these are the long bones. The thigh, the leg, and the foot are short bones. So we have long bones and short bones. And then we have 3 categories of bones. We have flat bones also. This one's here. This one you can see how flat it is. Even the skull is flat. Although it is bent like that, but it's flat. These are flat bones. Now, then we have the 3rd category of bones is irregular bones. Like the vertebral bones, the bones of the spine. They are irregular because they don't have, they are neither long nor short, no definite shape. They are irregular. That's the name they give them. So we have those 3 categories. But growth occurs only in the long bones. The long bones have a tube inside it. Inside is hollow, which contains bone marrow. And bone marrow is where blood is produced. The blood cells, the platelets, the white blood cells, the red blood cells, they are produced from the bone marrow. And then at the ends is where growth takes place. So when the cells are produced, then they go and settle at the extremities. And more cells being produced as they divide more and more. So you find that these extremities become growing more and more at both ends. And that's how it goes. That's how you increase your height. Now, and that also depends on many things. It depends on the genes, because if your parents were tall, you can be tall. Not necessarily. Your parents can be both short, but you're tall. Because tallness is also carried by the genes. But we have genes existing in pairs. One is recessive, one is dominant. The dominant one is the one who will show up. The recessive one, it hides, it doesn't show up. So sometimes you might be tall, both your parents are short, but you have the genes for tallness. It is just hiding because it's recessive. And if that's the case, you must have got it from your great-grandparents. And it is passed through the generations to you. But then it can turn around that it becomes a dominant. So it starts showing up. So you find parents who are short but having tall kids. That's what happens. So the tallness or shortness is from the growth of the bones at the ends of the bones. The ends are called epiphyses. One is epiphysis. So this is called the shaft, the middle part of the bone. So at the epiphysis, that's where you find growth happens. So now, let us go to the hormone. Now, if you have too much of growth hormone, GH, growth hormone, what are you going to have?
You be a giant.
A giant. You're going to get a child who is born but very tall. And then as he grows, within a few months he's here. Within years is on top of the roof. Is that good? Not at all. Why? Because giants don't fit in the normal environment. Because they are too tall, they cannot stand erect in this room because they are higher than the roof. the ceiling. If they come into this room, they will go in like that, and that's very uncomfortable. And they cannot drive in a normal car because you need to have a special car for them. They cannot lie in a normal bed because you need to make their own special bed. They cannot wear normal shoes. You need to order from the manufacturer. So if you're going to order everything from the manufacturer, you order a car from the manufacturer, the clothes from the shoes and everything from the manufacturer. It is inconvenience. So it is not good at all. So that is overproduction of the growth hormone, gigantism. What about insufficiency? If it is insufficient, then you are going to have what? The opposite of giant is dwarfism. Dwarfism. Sometimes they call it cretinism. But we're not going to go into that now. You'll do that in pathology or from anatomy physiology. So gigantism and dwarfism are contrasting. The dwarfs are right on the ground, they never grow tall. They become old, whether they are 60 or 70, and they are right there or close to the floor. We don't want that because they don't fit in the normal environment. Because these people also have to have everything ordered, especially manufacturing. It's too expensive. Even a car, you're going to be making their own car or a bicycle, order from the manufacturer. Who is going to do that? So that is a disadvantage. So it is considered as a disease. So that's dwarfism of growth hormone. So if you follow growth hormone, you'll find that it comes to dwarfism somewhere. Growth hormone. Maybe it is not included here, but okay, you know what it involves. Then we go to adrenocorticotropic hormone. We used that as an example at the beginning. Those who came late will have to get the notes. Okay, adrenocorticotropic hormone is produced by the anterior pituitary, but it will affect only adrenal gland. And it does not affect the entire gland. It depends on which layer, because the adrenal gland has two layers, the cortex and the medulla. The medulla is the inner layer, the cortex is the outer layer. And the cortex produces cortisol and aldosterone. Cortisol affects the sugar, so that can be connected to diabetes or low blood sugar, where if it is high or low. And aldosterone affects sodium, which is salt. So the salt affects the absorption of water from the kidneys back into the blood, or production. So it depends. If it is too much, you will have too much water, you will have high blood pressure. If it is too less, you will have low blood pressure. If it is cortisol, you will have diabetes or low blood sugar. So that's why we have these diseases. Now these diseases are found in some syndromes. There is one we call Cushing syndrome. The Cushing syndrome is a unique syndrome. Is a collection of different pathologies, different diseases. So Cushing syndrome can be produced by the adrenocorticotropic hormone secretion, abnormal secretion. Because if it is produced in excess, you're going to have diabetes. Then you're going to have hypertension at the same time. So those are two different diseases. So you have diabetes and you have high blood pressure. But in addition to that, if it is in women, it also affects the production of certain hormones, female hormones or male hormones. For example, they will increase the testosterone and will increase the estrogen also. So if you have, females have more estrogen, because female is specifically a female hormone, estrogen, but testosterone is a male hormone. Testosterone causes the changes that occur in our bodies, males. And that starts to be more obviously seen at adolescence. Because at adolescence, the boys start to have a deep voice, they start to grow facial hair, they start to be more muscular, and broad shoulders, and they look like males. They are. That is because of testosterone. And since then, they can be productive. They can have children because their reproductive system starts to be ready for production. So if they have relationship with a female, they produce a sperm which can meet with the egg and cause fertilization and cause zygote, embryo, and newborn baby, fetus. So that is in men. But when we have abnormal production of these hormones, it affects even these male and female hormones. So females can have excess testosterone that they are supposed to have, because even men have estrogen, but it is in insignificant amount. So you don't see the changes that occur in females in men. And females have insufficient testosterone, so you don't see facial hair, all these broad, muscular women like that naturally, unless they go to the gym and do excessive amount of exercise to be muscular. But normally it's like that. The hair does not go, the hair grows too long, but the men, it can grow long if you want very long, but then that's not the normal. And then what about breast? The females will, after adolescence, they have breast. And after delivery, the breast, it comes down here because after they have started sucking babies. That doesn't happen in men. Men also have breast, but it is just like a sign. Little bit sign here shows up. It never grows this. But if a man has excessive amount of these hormones, the man will start to grow breast. Starts to grow breast, and it affects the voice. The man will have low voice. And then these men might not have the beards instead, but they may have a body which also look like a female body. See, men are a little bit stout and strong, but women are. So look, a man starts to be like a female because of excess hormone of estrogen, and a female starts to have masculine features like a man because of excessive testosterone. That is put up in what we call a syndrome called a Cushing syndrome. So that's why you see here there's another one, Addison's disease. Addison's disease is the opposite of Cushing syndrome because aldosterone and cortisol are opposing each other. Aldosterone is salt. But in some syndromes, they have both excess. If you have this in excess in a female, that female will have Cushing syndrome because the female will start growing beard, deep voice. If the female talk on the phone, you think you are talking to a man, but it's a female, and if you call her sir, they feel offended. Okay, it is because of these changes in the body, and they also have Cushing syndrome. They have a bump here. That's how you can identify them. A hump, not a bump, a hump here. You know what a hump is? This part becomes bent, and then they have a belly, pot belly, because of accumulation of excess fat. Because those hormones allow more fat to be accumulated here. So they have a pot belly, they have a bump, they have beards, they have a deep voice, and the way they walk also like men. See, we are born in different ways. The way we behave, the way we do things are different, male and female. But these females start to behave like men. And then if you see that, then you can make a diagnosis. This is Cushing syndrome. Now, it can be treated. It can be controlled to some extent. So Addison's disease will be the opposite of Cushing syndrome. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of that, but then here you have these hormones involved, testosterone, because testosterone is also produced from the adrenal gland. Both males and females have adrenal gland. They have kidney and adrenal gland. And so both male and female have testosterone, but the amount in the females is very low. Estrogen, both men have estrogen also, but the amount is very low. So it is insignificant. It does not cause any effect. So if it is excess, that's when we get these diseases. So the women with Cushing syndrome have both high blood pressure and blood sugar because of cortisol in excess. And that is in excess because of adrenal gland is producing too much of this. Because this is stimulated by the brain to produce too much of this, and that produces too much of this, which is causing these diseases. Okay, now we are going to run out of time before the quiz. Now, when it is 10 minutes, let me know so that you take the quiz because you are behind in quizzes. Now, okay, we have here, that is prolactin. Prolactin affects what? Who knows?
The breast.
Lacto, the word lacto, milk. If you see anything to do with the lacto, you know you are dealing with milk. So prolactin affects the breast, and that affects the production of milk. So production is not produced all the time, but it's produced immediately after fertilization when a female becomes pregnant. Then the breast starts to develop, and you can see changes in the breast because if you're a doctor or you're a nurse, you're working with a female who is pregnant, you will see these changes, even discoloration of the nipple. All those changes are because of the hormone. So it starts to make the breast prepare milk. So then when the baby is born, then the flow of milk is initiated by another hormone, progesterone. So these hormones work together and they are very organized. They work just in time because the females don't produce the milk unless they are pregnant or they deliver baby. So when the baby is delivered, the food is ready and there is enough production to keep the baby for the first 6 months until the baby can be started on solid food. And that milk has all the nutrients. It has carbohydrates, it has proteins, it has fat and vitamins and minerals. So it's complete nutrition for the baby. But after 6 months, the baby has grown too big that it is not enough. So they have to be started on solid food. So that is prolactin. So what happens if there is excess production of prolactin? Tell me, what happens? Guess.
Too much milk.
Too much milk. And the breast will be too huge, too big, that like the female is moving here with the two tanks going this way and that way. That's a discomfort. It is not comfortable. It is too heavy and the production is increased so much that the milk which is produced is enough to feed 4 or 5 babies and you have only one baby. So what are they going to do? They are going to store this milk. At the hospital, we have seen full refrigerator full of milk from one mom only. Because they keep it there and they're just going, they don't sell it, but they can donate for other kids whose mothers do not produce enough milk. So that is because of prolactin. That is discomfort, it is inconvenient, so that's not what you want. So it can be considered as a disease, but because a disease is causing all discomfort and inconveniences and pain also.